Hi, everybody. In today's live episode, we are going to talk about the difference between you having a son or daughter who's into sports or into scouts, Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, or maybe they want to do both. Somebody in our last call yesterday brought up the point because I was talking about how sometimes, if you're not careful, sports can crowd out other activities that kids might do that might be very meaningful to them. And every once in a while, I'd like you to detach and take a bird's eye view of, is that particular sport that your son or daughter is engaged in, and the regularity of it, and the intensity of it, and the commitment to it, is that somehow crowding out other things that they might be able to do? One of those things might be Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts. So that's what we're going to address in this particular episode. Thanks for joining. My name's Phil Black. I run an online mentoring program called PrepWell Academy, where I help rising freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors make decisions like this, make decisions about where they're going to put their time, their energy, their resources, their money, how they're going to get into college, how they're going to think about careers, how they're going to think about majors, how they're going to think about life in general. So this is right up my alley. I've got kids who are both in scouts and also in sports. I don't have as good a knowledge on Girl Scouts, but from my exposure, I think they're going to be pretty much the same. So let's get into it right now. In terms of the differences, let's start with the similarities. I think most people would agree that for both sports players and Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts, there's a lot of camaraderie, there's a lot of socialization, there's a lot of life lessons that get learned during both of these events. There's a lot of friendships that are made. There's a lot of skill building and commitment associated with both of these camps, for sure. So both of them have that going on in a big way. Now, one thing that can sway me is the quality of the coach, the quality of the scoutmaster, and whoever's in charge of the Girl Scout troop. That can have massive impact because you can have a coach that is a downer and not really that positive and yelling at people and the kid's not having a great experience. You could also have a scoutmaster or whoever's in charge of the Girl Scout troop that's not particularly squared away. So that could be a factor that can push one thing one way or one thing the other way. You could have a terrible sports coach and get a lot more out of Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts if you had a great leader in charge of that. Vice versa, you might have a great coach who's very motivating and comforting and supportive, and that might blow away a really lame Boy Scout master or a Girl Scout troop leader. So that's going to be a swing factor one way or the other. So that's something to keep in mind. But I think there are some distinct differences between sports and scouts. And I'll go through those right now. And I think, if push came to shove, I might give a little bit of an edge to the scout side. Now, that's, of course, the caveat being you're not going to be a Division I athlete. You're not looking for a scholarship per se, and you're doing it more recreationally. So if you're somebody who's getting after it, you want to get a sports scholarship, and you're doing this sports day in, day out, it's going to be very difficult to then add scouts, Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts. Now, I have PrepWellers who are doing both, and I actually have high-level athletes and great scouts who are doing both. That is a rare breed. My sons are trying to do both. And time will tell whether they're able to work it out. Because they're both, if you want to do them well, and you have a good scout, and if you have a good troop that's getting out and doing things, and of course your sports team is doing things round the clock all season long, that's going to be tough. But I have seen it done. It takes a lot of organization, it takes a lot of commitment, and it takes a certain level of maturity and balance to be able to talk to the coaches, talk to the scoutmaster, to let them know, here are my priorities. Yes, I have full commitment to the sport, but every once in a while, I am a committed scout. I am a committed Girl Scout, Boy Scout. And if you're good enough, the coach is going to allow you to express yourself. They're going to allow you to get after it for the scoutmaster is going to let you play sports. The coach is going to let you do Girl Scouts in an ideal world. Once again, that's difficult to do. If you're going to do one or the other, that's a little bit more manageable. Trying to do both is difficult, but I think there are some benefits to trying. And maybe at some point you have to make a decision one way or the other, or if it's both recreationally, maybe you can toe the line between both the sports and the scouts. Now, in terms of the differences between the sports and the scouts, I think one of the big ones is in scouting, both in Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, the variety of people that your son or daughter will interact with is much more diverse, in my experience, in scouting than it would be in sports. If you look at the makeup of the teams on a sports team versus the makeup of the students in scouting, Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, I think you're going to see a much wider variation in the scouting. I find that sometimes on the sports team, the kids look the same, they act the same, they're interested in the same things, they have the same lingo, and they're cut from the same cloth, which is good. The camaraderie is there, and there are great friendships and deep support there. However, I think the benefit sometimes on the scouting side is they see a different angle, different types of people. Maybe that's somebody that's not athletic. Maybe it's somebody who has different interests, different background, different sensibilities, different abilities, whatever it might be. I think the ability for that person for that child to see a broader scope, to see different slices of life, probably goes to the Scouts in this case. I think it attracts a wider variety of students, and I think there's a lot of benefit to that, particularly when we're going into the real world. And the real world is not made up of all athletes, and the real world is not made up of people who look like us, act like us, physically they're like us, they train the way we do. There's going to be a wide variety of people who have different leadership styles, who have different followership styles, who have different academic bents, who have different behavioral eccentricities, if you will. So I think that's a big plus on the Scout side. The other thing I like is in the Scouts, what I've found is there's often more personal responsibility and personal accountability. Because on the sports side, a lot of times I just feel like I'm winding up the kids and sending them on their way. They're doing their sport, they come back. And it's just like a wind-up doll. It doesn't often, unless they're in a leadership role, I don't often feel like they have particular responsibilities. You know, I feel like I'm giving them their uniform and the equipment's there and they have a specific time and date. They go there, they do their thing, they come home. On the scouting side, however, as you know, if you know anything about Scouts, they typically have task books where they have to go through and get, whether it's a merit badge or they're trying to advance, rank advancement, and they have to take control of getting these tasks done. Now, with anything else, if you're a parent and you really want to be really all over them, you could be the one driving this rank advancement and driving the let's get this merit badge, and beating them over the head and making sure that they do these things. So, you know, it's not as if it's all personal autonomy with the Scouts, but I think the goal is that the Scout, the Girl Scout or the Boy Scout, they take control of their own destiny. They're the ones who are supposed to go find an adult to get a sign up. They're the ones that are supposed to work on this project, this long-term project. They're the one that's supposed to go to a peer and get something signed off. Or they're the one that's supposed to coach or mentor one of the younger kids, the younger girls, the younger boys coming up the ranks. So I think that's very unique to sports. Very unique to Scouts, and something that they might not get strictly doing sports is this idea of ownership of a project and ownership of moving up the ranks as opposed to being a cog in the wheel on a team. Setting goals, you know, obviously an athlete can set goals for themselves, individual goals, team goals, but the goals that a Scout often does can be a little bit more elaborate, they can be a little bit more intense, and they have certain checkoffs that they have to do. They have a book that they're following, and that typically does not happen in the sporting events. They have in sports they have a schedule. We're playing this tournament, we're playing that tournament, we're playing these guys over, we're playing this team over again, which is just a different flavor. I also think in Scouts there's an element of manual dexterity. Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts. Now I can speak a little bit more easily about Boy Scouts, which is they're learning to do things outside. They're learning how to tie knots. They're learning how to do lashings. They're learning how to take care of an axe and how to take care of tools and how to pitch a tent and how to canoe and how to rappel. And depending on how active the group is, they're learning a lot of unique things. There's a wide variety of things that they're learning that they may not get that variety in sports, where it's the same team and the same skills over and over and over again. Now, of course, they're honing those skills and the teamwork is getting better and they're learning to work with these kids. But it's a little bit of a different event when you have a wide array of skills in Scouts that are really advocated for. And part of the whole reason to be in Scouts and Girl Scouts is to check off some of those things and expose yourself to things that you might never even think about. I mean, there's hundreds of merit badges that you can get for a variety of things. Learning how to use a radio, learning how to play an instrument, learning how to play the bugle. I mean, there's a host of things that have a wide spectrum of skills and talents that I would say would err on the side of Scouts in terms of the diversity of that. Now, in terms of affordability, I haven't done the math, but my guess is that the scouting side is probably more affordable. It seems like the trips, at least in our case, maybe a little bit more subsidized. And it seems like on the sporting side, man, you are beholden to the team, to the tournaments, to the uniforms. Got to get a new uniform every season. Got to do this. Got to get this new soccer ball, this new lacrosse head. Hi, Jennifer. How are you? So it seems like you're a little bit more in a straitjacket on the sporting side versus in the scouting, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts. It seems as though you can pick and choose. If it's starting to get a little bit heavy on the expense side, you pick the activities that you want to do. It's not necessarily this monolith that's moving down this train, that's moving down the tracks, and you're either on board and you're paying up or you're out. You know, in Scouts, there seems to be a lot more discretion about what you're doing. There seems to be the ability to get some of these uniforms passed down. You can get used equipment. And there's not as much of a, you got to get the new thing, you got to get the new uniform. So I think in terms of affordability, the edge might go to scouting. Some people might say that they found it to be the opposite. Now, again, depending on how robust your Girl Scout or your Boy Scout troop is, I know our troop is extremely busy, and we could be even more busy than some different sporting teams because of the constant events. Every single week there's an event, there's skiing, there's trekking, there's bicycling, there's canoeing. I mean, it's unbelievable. The good part about it is you don't have to do everything. You don't necessarily feel obligated to do everything, as you sometimes do with the sport, where you have a commitment to the team, and if you're not there, then sometimes the team dynamic's not going to quite be the same, and you can get into some problems there. And then lastly, I think the last thing that maybe differentiates the Scouts from the sports is that typically, I know in Boy Scouts and likely in Girl Scouts get the Gold Award, and Boy Scouts it's the Eagle Scout Award. There is some kind of meaty, long-term project that you have to do. This typically includes long-term planning, typically includes budgeting, typically includes interacting with a variety of adults. It might be a city assessor, it might be somebody in the Parks and Rec, it might be a ranger, it might be your scoutmaster, it might be your Eagle Scout advisor, it might be somebody who you have to connect with in terms of building something somewhere. Maybe it's you need to get a permit somewhere, maybe you need to get a construction permit. So that's a big deal to have a high school kid, and this is part of the premise of PrepWell Academy, is to get them involved, get them to be advocates for themselves, and get them to do real world stuff. Going and being wound up like a little soccer doll and being wound up and being a little swimmer, and you go and you do your thing, that's not really the way the world works. You have to be an advocate for yourself. You need to know how to get after it, how to plan projects, how to meet with people, how for that something to get canceled, and all of a sudden you're backed against the corner. That's real life, and a lot of Scouts will do that. I just want to see Jen's here saying, don't forget Scouts also help fulfill community service hours for Honor Society. My kids are involved in both. For sure. I mean, I maybe I overlooked that because a lot of what Scouts are is community service and volunteer projects. They have to get certain hours for a particular troop or a particular Girl Scout event. So that's a huge part of it. Now, a lot of people think that colleges are going to be really zoning in on that. They're looking for some minimum level of community service or volunteer service. I wouldn't say that's quite the case, but man, it is great to get that just from a personal development point of view, to get that volunteering and that community service. So thank you for bringing that up. So again, just to recap on that last bit of the long-term planning, the long-term project, the budgeting, the connecting with adults, the having struggles, the having to get other kids to help you in these Girl Scout or Boy Scout final projects. It's a big deal, and it's a struggle, and guess what? Life's a struggle, as opposed to having these discrete tournaments where eventually when your athletic career is up, unless you're continuing in sports, you've pretty much learned what you're going to learn and you're out. So I hope this has been helpful. Now, I just want to address one last thing about, well, what are the colleges going to like more? A lot of people are going to be thinking about that. I take the perspective, what's the kid going to learn more? Because I think that will eventually manifest itself almost no matter what college your son or daughter goes to. But I know it's an issue that people want to think about. So in my view, I think an admissions counselor, or admissions officer, I try to put myself in their heads. And as they're getting applications, they have seen a lot of people who've played sports. They've seen a lot of people who have learned about commitment and learned about getting injured and coming back from injuries. They've learned about leadership positions on teams. They've learned about how the team had to come back from being down 3-0 and man, they really dug deep. So a lot of that stuff, I don't want to say is generic, but a lot of admissions officers have seen that a lot. I think there's a uniqueness to Scouts, Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts, that depending on how the student parlays that into their essay, into their interview, I think there's a lot of meat there. Now, I didn't mention it, but there's a lot of leadership involved in Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts. Now, for sure, there's leadership in sports, particularly if you're the captain, maybe you're the motivational leader. So there's certainly an aspect of leadership. But particularly the way that Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts is set up, you almost, to advance and rank, you almost have to take leadership positions. And that's an extremely important, in my view, skill, extremely important experience for a child to go through is leadership. Sometimes they're forced to be leaders. In sports, you don't necessarily have to be forced. If you're not picked to be the captain, you're one of the cogs in the wheel. Now, there's other ways to be a leader when it comes to sports, but in scouting, leadership is a big deal. Learning to be a leader up the chain when somebody's in charge of you, the senior patrol leader is going to be in charge of you, and then you have a patrol underneath you, you're in charge of them. Those lessons learned are very important. And scouting, I think, really hits that in spades. I hope this has been helpful. If you're interested in this, please tag somebody, write their name in here and allow them to read this as well. If you have input, if you have questions, if I've missed the mark on something, if I'm overstating the case, please call me out. I will answer your questions. In fact, this episode comes from a question yesterday where somebody who was watching said, "Hey, Phil, can you address scouting?" And I'm happy to do that because I'm a huge advocate for scouting, but at the same time, I'm a huge advocate for athletics and sports. So if you have an issue that you'd like me to try to address or you want to get my perspective on it, please jot it down in the notes, even if you're here after hours and not here with me live. If you're here and this has been recorded, jot it down there. If you're new to PrepWell Academy and you're interested, please go to PrepWellAcademy.com and sign up. If you're interested in how we do goal setting with kids, we do a lot of summer goal setting with rising freshmen through seniors. And go to PrepWellAcademy.com/P/goals. Send me what age your son or daughter's in, and I will send you a custom goal setting PDF that will help you manage, create, build a great set of goals for your son or daughter this summer, much like the Scouts do in their curriculum. So thank you for listening. Please spread the word. Share this message with others who think it might be helpful. And I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.